To some, he was a hero, a Robin Hood of the Wild West who dared to stand up to the powerful, robbing banks to give to the poor. A symbol of rebellion in a chaotic era. But to others, he was nothing more than a cold-blooded thief. A ruthless killer, a terrorist who spread fear across the land, living only by violence and plunder. So, which one was the truth? The story of Jesse James isn't just about one man, it's about America after the Civil War. A time when the line between right and wrong, between hero and villain, became blurrier than ever. Everything was colored by hatred, desperation, and a lingering pain. Jesse James wasn't born an outlaw. He was a young farmer, a Confederate soldier, who fought in a war that took everything from him. When it ended, he came home to a lawless world where old enemies were now in charge, and his family's property was under threat. That injustice pushed him to act. The first bank robbery wasn't for money, it was an act of revenge. It was a statement. And from there, a legend began to be written. But what do you call a man who robs from the rich and gives to the poor? A Robin Hood or a criminal? The line between those two images is thin, and for Jesse James, it vanished completely. From that first bank robbery in Liberty, Missouri in 1866, Jesse James became a sensation. This wasn't just a heist. It was a brazen, political statement. His gang, composed of former Confederate soldiers, was stealing money from a bank run by Northerners. To the poor farmers of Missouri, it was an act of retribution, a message that the war was far from over. For years, the James Younger gang terrorized banks and railroads across the Midwest. But it was the details that built the legend. During their train robberies, they were often polite, even apologetic to the passengers. They would take only the company's money, not the personal belongings of regular people. There are stories of them returning a wallet to an elderly woman and taking only the valuables from corporate executives. These tales spread like wildfire, cementing Jesse James as the Robin Hood of the West. He wasn't just a thief. He was a symbol of rebellion. But the legend hid a darker truth. The train robbery in Adair, Iowa in 1873 claimed the lives of an innocent engineer and fireman. Or the Winston, Missouri massacre in 1881, where Jesse shot and killed a ticket agent simply because he suspected the man knew his identity. The line between hero and killer began to blur. The press played a critical role in shaping both of these images. On one hand, Southern newspapers celebrated Jesse James as a freedom fighter, a man fighting back against a corrupt government. On the other, Northern papers, fueled by the railroads and banks, portrayed him as a terrorist, a monster. And the relentless hunt for him drove Jesse down an even darker path. Pinkerton agents were hired to track him down, but their methods were equally brutal. They attacked his mother's home and threw a bomb inside, killing his young half-brother and permanently maiming his mother. The act not only failed but further solidified Jesse James' image as a victim, a man unfairly hunted by the establishment. But the fear of betrayal and the life on the run turned Jesse paranoid. He began to kill members of his own gang who he suspected of disloyalty. His later robberies became more desperate and violent. The image of the folk hero faded, replaced by a tired, brutal man, trapped in a cage of his own making. The hunt was no longer just a chase between law and crime. It was a psychological war between a man losing his sanity and those who coveted the bounty on his head. The climax of this story wasn't a grand robbery, but a quiet, bitter moment. In 1882, Jesse James was living under an assumed name, Tom Howard, in St. Joseph, Missouri. He was married with children, trying to live a normal life. The years of being hunted had worn him down, and he had found a fragile peace. But that peace was shattered by the very people he trusted. The brothers Bob and Charlie Ford, new members of his gang, were staying in his home. They had no interest in ideals or vengeance. They were only interested in the $10,000 bounty on Jesse James' head. One fateful morning, Jesse turned his back on them to straighten a picture on the wall. He had unbuckled his pistols, setting them down on a chair. For a rare moment, he let his guard down. And in that moment, Bob Ford drew his revolver. The shot rang out, a sudden, sharp sound that tore through the silence. Jesse James fell, dead instantly. He died not in a blaze of glory, not in a heroic shootout, but by a cowardly shot in the back, from a man he considered his ally. Jesse James' death was not the end of his story. Instead, it was the beginning of an eternal legend. Bob Ford, the man who killed him, was hailed as a hero. But the public soon turned on him, branding him a traitor. He never truly enjoyed the reward. The very people who had revered Jesse despised Bob Ford. They had already etched Jesse James into history as a legend. So, who killed Jesse James? A coward for money, or a hero bringing justice? Was his killing a brave act to end a criminal's life, or a cruel betrayal, a message that nothing is forever and loyalty can be bought? In the end, it doesn't matter who Jesse James truly was. What matters is his story, a mirror reflecting ourselves back at us. It tells us about the heroes we choose, the fine line between light and shadow, between justice and crime. Legends are not born. They are made by us, by the stories we tell, and by the way we choose to remember them.